Usually we hear about new superhero movies flopping because they're filled to the brim with woke messaging. The writers insulted fans, or the storyline just isn't good. And over the weekend, the Suicide Squad released, which was a movie a lot of people were actually really looking forward to because it's a James Gunn film, Margot Robbie's last movie, at least for a while, as Harley Quinn, and the trailers actually didn't look that bad. A lot of people had a lot of hope in this film. But before this movie came out, the media was saying how the movie was gonna overperform estimates because it was really everything comic book fans could want. A great cast of characters, reviewers were giving it an amazing score, and now that the movie's been out for a few days, it actually underperformed at the box office, and it's sitting at around a 70% user score on sites like Metacritic. It is not doing as good as they thought it was going to. I have a few different articles that I want to reference. The first one is a Deadline article, and then I want to head on over to the Metacritic reviews. But before we get into the topic at hand, if you enjoy the content that I create, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Follow me on social media like Twitter or mine so that you can see when my content is posted. And if you do really enjoy the videos and the live streams that I create, please consider becoming a Dark Titan via Patreon for just $1 a month or donating via direct donations. All of the links are in the description, and of course, I do really appreciate all of the support. So the Suicide Squad misses market 72 million global, overseas on par with Birds of Prey's COVID complications continue at the international box office. Now, I definitely think that this was better than Birds of Prey. This movie was not bad. I think that the CGI was good, the storytelling was okay. I personally just wish the big baddie they were facing was a little bit cooler, but the movie just wasn't laid out properly for me. The jumping in time was way overdone. I really didn't like it. 3 days before, 30 minutes before, 2 days later, a week later, it was too much, at least for me. I think that if they had only done it at the very beginning, it would have been much better, but it's the way the movie was laid out. I do think the movie was okay. It was way better than Birds of Prey or Black Widow, but it definitely wasn't a 97% rating that the critics are giving it. Anyway, it says, after debuting at 6.7 million from 5 overseas markets last weekend, Warner Bros. /DC's The Suicide Squad moved into a wide offshore release this session, taking 35 million from 69 total international box office markets. This is a touch below the like-for-like opening of 2020's disappointing Birds of Prey, 36.6 million at today's rates, and under the 40 million we were seeing coming into the frame. Birds of Prey was a genuinely awful movie. It does not surprise me that that movie flopped so hard. So the offshore is now 45.7 million, and the global total, with domestic's debut, is 72.7 million. Still, this well-reviewed James Gunn-helmed franchise entry had a strong minus 25% hold in its already opened overseas markets, and notably landed number 1 in Russia, Mexico, Brazil, Spain, and Italy. Japan is due to release on August 13th. Nevertheless, and despite positive reactions, hopes were higher for the Suicide Squad, and there are several factors contributing to the lackluster start. So it does talk about overseas markets a little bit, saying closures in Australia and Mexico and the introduction of the health pass requirement in Italy this weekend impacted the debut. The latter market was down overall by an estimated 70%. In France, there is still confusion over the health pass, while competition from local titles was felt that there was as well in Germany and Korea. The Suicide Squad, whose title doesn't do enough to delineate from the 2016 movie, is also available on HBO Max domestically, making piracy another contributing factor, just as we've seen with all recent day-to-date films. I do not buy the argument that movies are underperforming or failing only because of piracy. Yes, piracy is way up because of the lockdowns, but it's the same tired argument that Hollywood's been claiming for almost 20 years. Besides specific markets being shut down and a few people pirating movies, I do think that this movie didn't do as good as they wanted because they expected people to be all in on another superhero movie. Its ratings just aren't doing that great right now, and it seems like people are pretty mixed on it. I do think that people are sick of new superheroes and supervillains being constantly introduced because, yeah, Harley Quinn was in it, and she did play a big part in it, but besides that, it's not like everyone in the original Suicide Squad movie was in this, even though it was supposed to be a standalone sequel. I do think that people are okay with seeing new characters, but when you literally keep rebooting the same stories or you make a sequel with one returning character, people are eventually gonna be burnt out on it, and that leads me into reading some of the Metacritic scores, because right now it is sitting at a 74 for critic reviews and a 7.1 for user score. So let's head on over into the user scores. There are 72 negative reviews, 63 mixed, and 300 positive. So there are a lot of positive reviews. A 7.2 is not bad. It is a pretty average score, but there are some people who aren't all that impressed with it. There are a lot of 7s, 8s here, a couple 5s, a couple 0s as well. But people are saying things like James Gunn makes his mark in this movie. It is spectacular from start to finish, and the action scenes are excellent, the humor is good, and above all, each character stands out. I do think that the humor was pretty good, the action scenes were very good, the CGI was very good. Again, for me, I just think that the story was a little bit lacking, and I do think the time jumping was overdone. Somebody gave it a 1 and said this movie is painful to sit through. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. The action is terrible, the comedy is awkward, and if you want a good superhero comedy to watch, this movie is also an adult film and not appropriate for children. I do think because this is a rated R film and it's not doing as great in the box office as they were hoping, I do think that this could hurt rated R films. I personally am a-okay with seeing rated R films, adult-only films, but these companies want as much money as possible, so the lower the rating, the more people the films can reach. I do think that this could hurt rated R films because companies are gonna go, well, if we're making a rated R movie, we want to see rated R money. They basically want Joker levels of success, or else they could have just toned this down a little bit, toned down some of the violence, some of the adult jokes, the swearing, and made it, a PG-13 film. I do not think this film would have been as good if it was PG-13, but still, companies want to rate things the lowest age that they can for reach. I do really like superhero films and supervillain films. I like seeing new casts of characters every once in a while. But a big problem for this film was the fact that it's called The Suicide Squad, when just a couple of years ago we got Suicide Squad. I think the names were way too similar. We see Harley Quinn on the front of all of the marketing and people are gonna go, oh, the first movie was awful, this movie's gonna be bad, why would I want to watch a sequel? It is pretty different. It is not the same type of movie. Everything's just laid out very differently, different directors, lots of different cast members, but at the same time, I do think that that also impacted how people viewed the film. I think they should have slightly renamed it. I think that some of the jokes could have been tuned a little bit. The pacing of the story could have been a bit different, but we got this product, and I do not think that it was awful. I just don't think that it was great. I do worry for the future of comic book movies because while this one is getting pretty decent reviews, I do think that because it underperformed, because it was rated R, this could hurt comic book movies because companies are just going to see it as, okay, well, adults aren't showing up to watch these films. They're not going all that well in the box office. We might as well go back to our original formula, which is PG-13, a couple of jokes can kind of, be for adults, but at the same time, kids can also watch it. And I don't really like that. I want them to be unique and outside of the box, and I want them to try new things, but because box office numbers are low, they're probably going to look at this and go, well, we're definitely not going in this direction again for a while. Somebody gave it a 7 and said after all of the average Suicide Squad comes a new one, this time from James Gunn, and I can tell you it's good. In the first few minutes we're introduced to the characters, and they are, in my opinion, better and much more memorable. The best for me is still Harley, and I quite like King Shark there. Next up, there are some excellent action scenes, and to sum it up, for me, a good film that has rectified the reputation of Suicide Squad, and I wouldn't complain at all if there was a sequel that built on this. from the 2021 Suicide Squad and forgot all about the 2016 one. I could forget about the 2016 Suicide Squad and be perfectly content in life. It was not a good film. It didn't have a lot. It didn't have a lot of action. The characters weren't that memorable. The story was mediocre. It for me was a flop. Somebody gave it a 3 and said this film is definitely not the greatest comic book film like others claim it is. Characters had little to no development or arc, plot was meh, the action was not that interesting, and the humor was mediocre at best. It is a shame that people are pretty mixed right now because reviewers are generally pretty happy with it, and there are a lot of people that think, oh my gosh, this movie was good, and if you like it, good for you, I'm glad you liked it, but it did underperform at the box office, and there are a lot of people who really didn't enjoy it as much as they thought they were going to. But that's all that I had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.